Hey everyone, it's another IG Live about the word of the week for the word. And this week the word is. Oh, yep, let's start it again. Let's see. So the thing just popped up saying that now I'm going live, so I don't know if I'm gonna need to say this again, but I'm gonna say it all again. Oh, look at that. Boom. Boom. Hey people. Awesome. So this is another week talking about the word, and the word of the week this week is aporia. It is it's a fascinating word. It actually gives me I'm slightly nervous about the word because it's such like a big philosophical word, but um, the word is aporia, and it means impasse or puzzlement, and the word was quasi popularized, I guess, by French philosopher Jacques Derrida, and he used aporia to be. Let's back up real quick. So Derrida started it, or popularized it now, but the Greeks and Plato used it initially. So with the Greeks and Plato, Plato's Platonic dialogue would often leave people in a state of aporia because he would always poke at all their thoughts and question everything that they believed in, and by the end, they just weren't sure what they believed anymore, and that created a puzzlement or an impasse. And this could be, depending on that person, that could be perceived as a positive or a negative thing. And so aporia was like a thing that happened through discourse in many ways, and you broke superstitions and things like that. Well, Derrida changed this up a bit because he felt that as we lived in the world, we didn't need some Plato, some smart guy poking at all of our ideas to make aporia happen. Aporia would just happen as you matured and lived in the world and saw the complexity and broke free from your simplistic understandings. And so this aporia, this puzzlement, this impasse, which in many ways you could say, we play confront those dilemmas with anxiety. He thought confronting with aporia would be good, and that you should look at aporia as a good thing. That this puzzlement, this impasse, is a sign of maturity and not a sign of weakness or things like that. And so it's a really fascinating word or concept, and I think it's really important in this time, in this day and age, where we have COVID and just a lot of climate change and lots of stuff that makes you wonder, like, what's going on, how do we understand this is really complex, what are the answers. Having that impasse means that you're seeing more, you have like a greater consciousness of your environment, and therefore that's aporia, and that's good. um, but as I thought about this word aporia, it's interesting because it's not a word that I think you can do in isolation. It's this word, you have to do it with other people. So just like even with Plato, like Plato prompted aporia. So that's like more than one person. That's two people in a dialogue. But even if you're having a dialogue with yourself and you have like lots of questions or stuff or an impasse, it's rare, I think, that you figure that out completely on your own. Like, you definitely are going to need people around you that are going to let you say your crazy thoughts and tweak them here and tweak them there, and and make sure uh, and make sure everything is like okay. And so it's something that has to be done collectively, and I think that's, as I've thought more and more about this word, like the most fascinating thing, because if you have an impasse or a puzzlement and you're trying to figure out what to do next, you kind of have to sit on it or think about it for an extended period of time. And if you don't get the space or the community, the stability to think about something for a week, a month, half a year, couple years before, like, you've really honed in on what makes sense, then it's going to be really, really easy to look for simple solutions. And that's, and if you look at, say, like you have economic hardships or other sorts of things that make it so that you just can't allocate the time to think about the impasse or the complexity, and you just have to do something simplistic just to survive, then Aporia will be hard to do. And so, like, one of the complex things that I think about with SCL is, like, frankly, I wouldn't have come up with, like, the ideas of this without having, like, a state of Aporia for a long time, and having friends that let me bounce ideas off of them and be kind of like a functional madman for a little bit. But at the same time, if you're making, like, we have community as a component of our organization, and that community is that going to be kind of that process of being with Aporia sometimes, because there's still, there's lots of parts of SCL that I am constantly trying to figure out, and I don't have, it's like, man, I'm puzzled, and I have an impasse about how to do this next part of that part or whatever. But I think hopefully my team helps me figure this stuff out. But, like, that's part of it, and as people become part of the community, there's gonna be lots of questions about, like, there's so many questions about Evtopia. How do you make Evtopia? How do you do this? How do you do that? All of those are like impasses and doubts and puzzlement that you get from maturing, that you work through collectively. You can't do it entirely as an individual. And so, but I could ramble. I could talk about Aporia for a while. If either of you guys have any questions, this is a good time to ask. But one thing that's interesting about Aporia is I like that it's a very it's like it's a philosophical word that I think is easy to transition out of just philosophy. Like, and Geist is also one of those words where, like, in German, it's more common of a word, like it means ghost, and there's a philosophical component to it that's significant. But Aporia is an old Greek word that people don't really use that often anymore. But just like angst was a word that Kierkegaard basically invented, and now it's common, I think Aporia also has that potential to be that type of word. We just have to facilitate, like, the community to manifest that growth, because angst and anxiety, those are things you can do as an individual, but Aporia is really something that you need a community. Like, you can get anxiety and you need to solving it on your own is hard. Solving it collectively is a lot easier, therapists and stuff like that. Here's a good one. Are there some specific practices that help you embrace the discomfort of Aporia? Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, it's all, like, mental. It's really interesting, and meditation and stuff like that's part of it. But the essentially what the impasse with Aporia is, that feeling of like pain or hurt, or that happens when you don't know something and you doubt yourself. Like, even before, let's say 15 minutes before we do these IG lives, I always have a moment where I'm like, oh, I hope this goes well. Maybe, do I need to do it? But you have the idea of Aporia, and it's like, hey, this is growth, this is growing, this is doing stuff that's helpful. In some facet, we'll figure it out, do it. So you play, like, a mental game in your head. That I'd say an example, like going to the gym or playing a sport, like how your body feels at the gym and how your body feels after the gym is normally not that good. Like, how your body feels maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3 months after consistently going to the gym, then it starts feeling good. Then you start seeing results, and you appreciate it. But you only do all of that work because there's a narrative and there's physical proof of the benefit. And even if you don't see your benefit yet, you can look at somebody else's benefit and you can say, I can do this because this helps me grow. This is progress. I can see the changes in my body. I can get on the scale or whatever. And so the pain part isn't the biggest part of the gym. It's having a narrative, a language that encourages you to do stuff that helps you grow, to get past an impasse. And so Aporia is like that. You're doing it in stuff that you can't see as well because it's mental, or it's like it's an action here or there that's not as easy to see as working out or something. So I think having the word and knowing that pain that you feel, that doubt you feel, is actually indication of growing and not an indication of doubt. So it's a mental battle, which is a good one. All right, Jessica, here's a good question. Let's see. I generally sense that women may experience aporia in their relationships more than men just because of the heightened emotional range we can articulate. But maybe I'm misunderstanding the word. It's a great question. And so I can't answer if women have it more than men, or if how it breaks down along gender. I don't think that's a stat we can ever really create. But the word, now to go over the definition, the word it essentially means impasse, puzzlement, or doubt, and I think that just is an innate part of the human condition. The thing that Derrida did that's fascinating is he's talking about this impasse, puzzlement, and doubt as a thing that happens as you grow in life, and that is due to maturing. Now, all right, let's kind of go more into his philosophy here. So with his philosophy, the key word is deconstructionism. This word gets used all the time nowadays about people trying to deconstruct this or deconstruct that, and one of the big issues with understanding deconstruction is it's not destruction of something. It's if you have like a social structure, a social norm, and you are living within it as a person, you have an obligation to deconstruct that, to look at it, examine it, and figure out what does or doesn't make sense. And as like any person that is in an oppressive situation in their society, whether you're a woman or a minority or something, there is an onus that you're going to need to deconstruct your society so that you don't just like tacitly accept like perpetual oppression as you live. Like deconstructing your society, examining it, and then trying to make something new and better is essential. And Derrida's philosophy is way more complex, but this notion of deconstruction kind of boils down to that. And so as you're deconstructing something, you're gonna then have an impasse because you got to figure out like what's the good part, what's the bad part, what's the new thing that I make. Is taking this apart even a good idea? You're doubting yourself. You're gonna be confused as to why is this even a norm? Why all this stuff that you're confronting? That is gonna be aporia, and that's gonna happen organically as you examine and look at the complexity of your world via deconstructing it and not just settling for the norms. And so aporia is going to happen if you apply a critical, conscious eye to your environment. And so I think, I don't know, it's an emotional thing. It's also like an analytical thing. It's just kind of being in your space, and I feel, and one thing for Derrida that's key to this is that he is Jewish. He died, so he was Jewish, but he grew up in Algeria, And so, growing up in Algeria, the Muslim majority population definitely did not like him for being Jewish or French, and that made him have to think about the nature of his environment. He goes to France despite being French and smart and going to the top schools. He was Jewish, and he was ostracized, and so this mandated that he had to deconstruct a lot of his world to make sense of it, and in so doing, he constantly had puzzlement and doubt, or aporia, and this was a sign of maturity and a process you go through to make something better, and not just like succumbing or accepting the status quo. So I don't know how this falls along like gender or racial divides. If one group's going to be more apt at having aporia than the other, but the key thing is when you have those doubts or anxiety, there's emotional responses you can have, and then there's the actions that you can have based, that derive from those emotions. And I think having this notion of aporia as one of the ranges of responses you can have is is great. So I hope that answered your question, Jessica. Uh, uh, okay, cool. Jackie's got a question. By accepting the discomfort of aporia, you are able to take the action to grow instead of being stuck in a state of doubt and inaction. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to look at it. I would, the slight difference I'd say is like you can have doubts and action at the same time, and also another thing is like action could be contemplation. Action could be thinking and reading. It might not be like going out into the streets or protesting or whatever. Like there's various forms of action, but um, and so yeah, the discomfort is just natural, and it's really when you really think about it, like a lot of being alive is various types of discomfort that you then have to figure out, you know, how to deal with it. And they're minor things like, what, you know, this 11-year-old kid that's in my house. His name is Lucas. He plays he has trumpet lessons. I don't know, every other day, and so I'll be on a Zoom call and I'll just hear a trumpet blaring in my house. That's annoying. But is it annoying to the point where I'm just gonna say, hey, tell this kid to stop playing his trumpet? Of course not. I'll just figure out how to like be cool with the trumpet going on for an hour and then just keep on living my life. That's clearly not like a profound seismic type of discomfort that you would need like a philosophical concept in most cases, but to be honest, that is a minor discomfort that you then think about and say, this is a discomfort that I'm perfectly cool with living with. And I actually think it's beneficial to make sure that this kid gets to play his trumpet. My Zoom call or whatever it is just isn't that important. Uh, so, so yeah, I might have rambled a little bit on that. So let's see. Do you know if this word is used regularly in other parts of the world? No, aporia is not a very common word. It's still like maybe they still use it in Greece quite a bit. I don't know, because it is a Greek word, and so it still might be used in Greece. But no, other places don't really talk about aporia, and it's largely because Derrida is a very controversial philosopher because in deconstruction, um, he tried to deconstruct a lot of just like the norms of academia and philosophy, and so the profession and the space in which he excelled in many ways just did not like him, and so he's and then also like his work is he wrote like 40 books, and his work is complex, but its goal in many ways is to impact everyday people. And when he was alive, and when he also, and this is another thing, like France is a really peculiar place. It's great in many ways, but like they have celebrity philosophers who are celebrity philosophers in France, but they're not international philosophers, where those philosophies shape, much out of the francophone world. Like, we'll learn about it, but we won't necessarily apply it to the same degree as the French might. So Derrida was famous during his lifetime, and was, he would do debates and, lectures in America and stuff like that. But his words, you know, deconstructionism clearly became the one that rocket launched, and everyone uses it, and they kind of misuse it in many ways too. Now you'll get you go to a restaurant, you'll get a deconstructed cheeseburger or something. That's not really what he had intended. um, but no. So aporia is not the big word that he popularized. Deconstructionism definitely was the big one, and then the aporia, and then maybe his other word that's popular is logocentrism, but that's a whole other thing. Cool. Let's see. Oh, Jessica with another one. The whole COVID situation is like that general discomfort, right? So every conversation I have these days with people I care about feels like, or a lot like, aporia. 100%. Like, COVID-19 has put everybody in a state of aporia, and it's not that we are in this aporia because someone's asking us all these questions. It's literally that life has just progressed naturally in a certain way that has forced people to question everything. And this questioning gives people a lot of doubt and anxiety, and they're puzzled, they're at an impasse, they don't know what to think, they don't know what's good, they don't know what's bad, and they don't know how long it'll take for them to figure out what's good and what's bad. And that is aporia. And that's good, because if you juxtapose it to the people that are coming up with really simple solutions, their solution is, let's just act normal in a pandemic. Let's go get our hair cut. Let's go to a bar. Let's open up the churches. Let's just act normal and we'll be okay. That is a simplistic solution where they want to avoid any kind of doubt, any kind of anxiety or analysis, or deconstructing their beliefs. And the hope of a lot of people is that, like, after COVID's over, we will be in a position where we can examine and question our existing, or the previous status quos, and make better ones by deconstructing them and seeing the flaws. But yeah, no, COVID has put everybody in a state of aporia. And like, another thing that's interesting with philosophy is, a lot of philosophers talk about the same stuff, and so, but they'll use different languages, either because it's different time periods, or they speak different languages and they have like a different, like, societal context. So right now we're talking about an existential crisis, and, like, yeah, that is very true. An existentialism, a question, examining existence. COVID definitely prompts that now. That the emotional response, the feeling people have of that existential crisis, looks like it's aporia in many ways, if they haven't decided to stick with their norm and act like everything is okay. And so, if we, like, once COVID happened, there was a lot of conversation about Camus' book, The Plague, and how, in The Plague, a lot of people in that book, a lot of characters tried to act like everything was fine, and they just, those people just kept on dying. And the wise person who was, like, modeled after Camus was the doctor who was there, fixing people, and he kind of had his own philosophy of how to live, and that philosophy worked well in this situation. And I think with existentialism, the idea is to give people that philosophy, but not everyone's gonna believe wholeheartedly to some philosophy, and no matter what, you're gonna get doubt at some point. And so aporia is definitely one of those emotional states that occur when, with COVID. And the proper thing is to figure out how to create community, or whatever you need to allow people to cope with that aporia and create something better, because you know one person might come up with a better solution in a day, and it doesn't phase them, but that doesn't mean that everybody else will. Like, they'll still need like a communal support to figure out how to not revert to simple solutions that clearly won't work anymore. And so, yeah, I hope that answered your question. But yeah, COVID is definitely putting people in a state of aporia, and that's partially why I picked the word. A lot of the words of the week that I've been choosing, I think, are words that can help everybody in this situation. Kairos, Stila, Convivere, Geist, Aporia. All of those are languages, words that can help people in Corona. And so yeah, but yeah, that's our word for this week. I think it's a really big word, and I think it's not that hard for people to use it. Like a friend of mine, like a year ago, she was telling me about her, like, she had a loss in her family, and she just didn't know how to think, and I could see that she really wanted to know how to feel, and I told her about this word aporia, and it's like, you don't need to know how you should feel. Just be within the state. But the fact that you have this feeling, or you're feeling this chaos or whatever, that's growth. You're trying to figure out how to live in the world without this other person in it, which is a very big thing to wrap your brain around. So take some time and think about it. But as you're thinking about it, and you're at this impasse, you're puzzled, you have doubts as to whether you can even do it without the person around. That's all growth. That's all life. That's all confronting the complexity of life, in conflict with, like, not necessarily simplistic, but just solutions that clearly no longer will work. And she really liked this word aporia. She said it was really helpful for her doing that. Okay, here we go. When you go about your day, do you actually think of the word like, oh, this is an aporia moment, or does the definition just subconsciously exist in your thinking? Oh, uh, I think at this point, it it more so exists subconsciously. I think initially, um, yeah. So like the kid in my house, this is subconscious. But like initially, when I heard of the word, it it would be more in my head, and I'm not like the best journaler or whatever, but sometimes I'll write like a word to start my day, or or something. So like I would occasionally I'd write aporia at some point, just write it out to kind of like make it clearer in my mind that that's what I was feeling, or if you're at like a moment of doubt or puzzlement, and you just don't think you can figure something out, or you can't do something, there's always like a voice in your head that's like, ah, quit. And I'll say, like, for myself, it's like I have voices like that all the time, and I think to a certain degree it's because I live in like an ethnocidal place that gives like so many like negative narratives, that like I think those narratives, those negative ones, have like gone into my brain as I've like focused on ethnocide and not focused on like all the other positive stuff you probably need to. And so like having doubts and silencing the other voices in my head, like I have to have a language in my head to silence them. And so at first you definitely need to say them or write them out, but now it's more subconscious, because I've been thinking about it for, I don't know, years, I guess. So it's a process, but it's not linear. Like every now and then I'll need to write a poria, like writing the newsletters is actually quite therapeutic, because there's all these things in my brain that are subconscious, but now they have to be written out. they become like more crystallized again. So it's not that they're in my head and I do something consistently with it, but like I have the words and therefore I can use them however I want. I could say them out loud, I can write them on a piece of paper that I show to myself, I can write them on paper and show it to other people. It can just be a subconscious thing where I go, oh wow, yeah, that's why I didn't like freak out when I had some dilemma, you know. And there are plenty of moments with trying to create SCL where I'm like, I don't know how to do any of this. I'm not good at any of this stuff. I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it. So, what's some sort of philosophy, a language to make me feel like I can do the stuff? And like one of the words or the things in it, like Aporia is in that mix. And so it's all of it. Just like how all words work in your brain, you know? I think one thing that I think is off-putting about how like America tries to talk about words is like they're very like in a box. Like you have positive affirmations and you do this, you do that, and it's like it's too rigid. I think having a routine is really important, but like if you acknowledge that life is really complex, simplifying things can make you feel anchored and like have control, but that that's not the answer. It's just all really complex. And so the words, you use them how it makes sense for you to use them, which is all of the above. Hope that answered your question, Jackie. And yeah, I think if no one else has any questions, we can wrap up this week. But that's the word aporia, and I think I think it's a good word. So thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Jessica, and we'll be back next week. Have a good Memorial Day weekend. Bye.